Okay, reflexive pronouns are used in three main situations. When the subject and object are the same, he hurt himself, right? Himself is a reflexive pronoun because it sort of reflects the word he, right? He hurt himself. So he hurt himself. Um, so the subject is he, and then himself is the object. So when the subject and the object are the same, that's when we use reflexive pronoun. Okay, another example is they call themselves architects of valor. So they is the subject of the sentence, and themselves is the object of the sentence, right? Because um, they is performing the action call, and then that themselves are receiving the action call, right? Um, so the subject and object are the same. So that makes himself and themselves in these sentences reflexive pronouns. Now, as the object of a preposition, this is our second situation, as the object of a preposition when the subject and the object are the same. So he purchases a gift for himself. So he is the subject of the sentence, and then himself is the object of a preposition. The preposition um, being for, um, but essentially himself is an object. He's getting a gift purchased. Now he did it by himself. So by is another preposition. And for can be a conjunction as well, but essentially it's object of a preposition. So he did it by himself. So by is a preposition, and then himself, he did it alone. He did it by himself. So himself is the object of the preposition by. He did it by himself. And then, but it's not a subject, right? Because the subject of that sentence is he. So he is the subject of that sentence, but the object of the preposition by in that sentence is himself. So that is a reflexive pronoun there again. Third sentence here, that guy is yelling at himself. So at, another preposition, that guy is yelling at himself. And it's reflecting, right? Because he purchases a gift for himself. He's not buying for someone else. It's reflecting back to him, right? He did it by himself. It's reflecting back to him. He did it alone. So it's he and himself. It's me, myself, and I. It's reflecting back to himself, back to one party or one group. We did this by ourselves, right? So ourselves would be the reflexive pronoun in that sentence because it reflects back to we, which is the subject in that sentence. So that guy is yelling at himself, the subject, that guy, and then himself is the reflexive pronoun, the object of the preposition at, and hence a reflexive pronoun. When you want to emphasize the subject, implying a contrasting previous dialogue, pretty not talked about a lot, but I think that this, and it probably comes up in every language, but certainly in English, this is something that I think plays out a lot. And there are some much smarter, multilingual, people out there that can really enlighten me on the granularity of what I'm saying. But yeah, I'm sure this is very similar in a lot of languages, but if not all languages, but certainly in English. I'll do it myself. No one else will help me. They drove to the school themselves. No one else gave them a ride. It kind of implies, if I state this sentence, they drove to the school themselves. It's kind of implied that there was a previous either dialogue or something that was a question that was raised that maybe someone else was going to drive them or they were going to walk. But more likely, actually, someone else was going to drive them, or they were going to catch a bus, or get there, a different way than driving themselves. So by saying they drove to the school themselves, it sort of implies a previous dialogue that is contrasting, right? It's a little bit different. It's saying, oh, you know, like if there's a discussion before this sentence is stated, oh, well, they usually catch the bus. Well, yesterday, they usually catch the bus in the mornings. Well, yesterday they missed the bus. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. They drove to the school themselves, right? So there's that previous contrasting dialogue talking about that they were going to take the bus and they usually take it, but yesterday they drove to the school themselves. So these three main situations are the places where these reflexive pronouns occur, or where they're used. Okay, so that last one, I know it might be a little bit confusing, but again, the more you practice, it'll start to be, I think, a lot more self-evident. But yeah, those are reflexive pronouns. Let's do intensive pronouns. Intensive pronouns have the same forms as reflexive pronouns. Unlike reflexive pronouns, intensive pronouns are usually not essential to the basic meaning of a sentence. Hence, if one takes the intensive pronoun out of the sentence often still makes sense as is. However, intensive pronouns better clarify to the reader who the writer is referring to. So we're going to obviously show some examples. So right here, intensive pronouns, they frequently follow the form of pronoun / noun and then intensive pronouns. So he himself, etc. So she herself was the sole proprietor of her corner lemonade stand. She herself was the sole proprietor of her corner. So if the writer wanted, or the speaker wanted, the writer or speaker could have said she was the sole proprietor of her corner lemonade stand. But if you say she herself, it further intensifies the fact that she's doing it solo and she's doing it, she's doing it on her own, essentially. And just emphasizing that nobody helped her. She herself was the sole proprietor. So there's that emphasis. And so, yeah, it makes sense, right? Because it's intensive. It intensifies the specificity of who is performing the action, right? She was the sole proprietor of her corner lemonade stand. Okay, cool. She was the sole proprietor. She ran it herself. But if you say she herself was the sole proprietor of her corner lemonade stand, that further emphasizes that she did it by herself. And that may or may not imply a previous contrasting dialogue. I don't think it's as obvious, but it illustrates the speaker and or the writer as someone who is making this emphasis abundantly clear for a reason, right? So this is for a reason, and obviously, the reader or speaker wants to make sure that all around these sentences is more and more evidence that they know what they're doing. Like, you don't just want to throw this out there and then not follow up on it. Like these intensive pronouns kind of imply that there's going to be some banter, at least after the sentence, at least, if not before as well. Like you're talking about, oh well, usually multiple kids have to run the lemonade stands, for XYZ, or on this block for XYZ reasons. But if the speaker comes out and says, well, she herself was the sole proprietor of her corner lemonade stand, on this block, etc. So that sort of implies that there's a dialogue, there's a banter, there's, some contrasting opinions or situations that might have happened in a different case. But in this case, she didn't have a partner. She herself was the sole proprietor of her corner lemonade stand. Okay, so now let's look at an actual example from 1984, George Orwell's classic. He wondered, as he had many times wondered before, whether he himself was a lunatic. So there's also, when you see an intensive pronoun, it also implies, there's sort of an implication that again, the emphasis and or an implication that the speaker or the writer is making. So without even reading the book, what kind of milieu or like environment um am I seeing uh about quote unquote him, the character that George Orwell's talking about here, or that George Orwell's um is talking about here. He wondered, or the narrator, right? And I think we're going to go over that a little bit in this course, definitely in another in the course, but I think a little bit. I'm not positive, um, but because I might have deleted it. Um, anyways, if it's an omniscient narrator or it's a a first person, etc. So, anyways, he wondered, as he had many times wondered before, whether he himself was a lunatic. Well, it sort of implies that at least my curiosity as a reader is I'm thinking there must be a lot of lunatics in this story. There must be a lot of lunatics in the story that he either that are clinically insane or that he considers lunatics, right? But perhaps what he's now wondering is that either they're lunatics and he's also one of them, or that maybe they're not lunatics at all. They're the sane people, they're the normal people, they're the regular people, and he is a lunatic. And that's where these intensive pronouns in the right hands, I think, can be really effective. They can really create, that emphasis and create that sort of dialogue around what's happening. And I think it adds, with one word, it sort of adds, you know, some interestingness. If that's even a word, I doubt it. But it just adds, you know, uh, it adds some dimension. But it has to be in the right hands. You've got to kind of know what you're doing. But this is a wonderful, wonderful word if especially if you're writing like a story, like a fiction story, like a and you have this omniscient narrator that's able to go in and out of these characters' brains. Um, it can really add a little bit of dimension to your writing. Um, anyways, just my 2 cents. Uh, hopefully you enjoyed this and hope to see you the next time. Thanks a lot.